I was going to return this month with a review of The Evil Within, but I kept getting hung up at a certain observation. In a review, it would have sounded like this. Tripwire booby traps, throwable distraction bottles, and the ever-present stealth option mean that much of The Evil Within is basically The Last of Us. And that's where the review would have derailed, because that problem is, by itself, more interesting to talk about than the game itself. The Evil Within is a third-person shoulder shooter with a double-stick FPS control scheme that constantly changes for the sake of little scripted cinematic moments. There's a light stealth system to mix things up and reward caution. There's a simple crafting system that rewards a few easy gameplay actions with a kind of currency you turn into ammo types. And of course, there's the ever-present upgrade system that buffs your character's carrying capacity up to that of a basic human being. And all those features describe an alarming number of games. But wait, I hear you may be asking, you're just cherry-picking a few minute similarities out of a small handful of otherwise diverse games. In which case, you're right. I am. I'm guilty as charged, I guess. See, instead of filling my life with meaningful social and professional experiences, I decided to review video games on YouTube, which means that for the past 2 years, I've played through most major releases all the way through, sometimes 2 to 3 times. And after 2 years of this, it's become harder to notice the differences than the similarities. It's getting to a point where it doesn't matter if a hot new AAA action game is first or third person anymore. They've got the same control scheme and the same features. I went from The Evil Within to Alien Isolation, and after the honeymoon wore off, I found it to be more of the same game I've been playing all year. That doesn't mean it's bad, it just means they're somewhat indistinguishable to a certain degree. The level of interaction and the choices these games offer are alarmingly similar. They're all grounded in the same conventions despite taking place in wildly different settings. Imagine you're trapped in outer space with a genetically engineered alien super predator. It's terrifying, right? Now imagine you're trapped in an employees-only section of a baseball stadium with a curious security guard, and that's a whole lot less terrifying, isn't it? But both problems are solved with the same solution. Open up your inventory, duct tape together a noisemaker right there on the spot, and throw it at a wall. It's logical, it works, it makes sense I guess, but it's also ubiquitous. And what's unfortunate about ubiquity is that it hurts the enjoyment of all games that share those similarities, regardless of their individual quality. As unique, innovative features begin to feel like cliches, the games that continue to use them, even if they use them well, are going to feel less surprising, less creative and well-made. After seeing that same cheap noisemaker trick work over and over again across so many different games and universes, I can't buy the illusion anymore. Though Watch Dogs and Alien Isolation may take place in drastically different times and places, they're almost the same thing. They're both grounded in the exact same conventions. They're both big-budget action games made in 2014 for 8th-gen consoles. They're both cutting-edge tech demos in their own particular ways, and they were both expensive to produce. Given the massive amount of time and money it takes to make these kinds of games, it's easy to understand why developers just want to stick with what works. That is how trends become established, after all. But that's also how new trends become established when the old ones begin to feel stale. In the past, the default action game genre was side-scrolling shooters, and then it was sprite-based shooters, and then bald Space Marine shooters, and World War II shooters, and modern military shooters, and now it's this wishy-washy third-person stealth shooter, sometimes with a big sandbox of chores attached. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard to tell what's trending without the help of retrospect, but it's also hard to ignore just how many gameplay features a lot of supposedly different games are sharing. And looking back over gaming's history, it's easy to see great examples of action games that used wildly different control schemes for much of the same actions of a conventional action game. For example, there is an incredibly diverse amount of ways to interpret how to point a gun and shoot it at a thing. Play Receiver, then Metroid Prime, then Metal Gear Solid 3, and note how none of them feel like the same old mix-up between Splinter Cell and RE4 that is the modern default. People might have ragged on older, more convoluted control schemes, but they were usually designed to be convoluted for a purpose. And at this point, I'm finding games more memorable if they serve some unique and deliberate purpose, rather than just routinely implementing whatever is accessible or playtests well. That's actually how Resident Evil made the transition from fixed camera tank controls to being a shoulder shooter. Unlike the previous games, it was focused on gameplay first rather than scares, and as a result, the entire survival horror prototype of RE4 was scrapped and replaced with a more straightforward shooter that just controlled and played extremely well. So well, in fact, that the 10 years of progress made since then doesn't really look like progress after all. I believe that the current default action game was the result of a natural evolution of iterative designs. Games these days are just playable. Moves generally have a sense of weight and impact to them. I haven't really gotten frustrated at a camera system in years, and your aim and shoot buttons are going to be conveniently located on the exact same L and R triggers no matter what in the world you're playing. Even if this stuff does work, after years of experiencing it, it's no longer exciting to see it work anymore. And that brings me back to The Evil Within, because the game's not terribly bad. In fact, it has some great combat and at least a few good levels. All things considered, I think the hate it's getting is a bit undeserved, but it's ultimately such a patchwork of ideas from other things. It's a jumbled collection of horror movie references, and also a throwback to RE4's gameplay, which is ironically not that uncommon these days. A whole lot of things that worked before got thrown in a blender, and the final game is this messy cliché smoothie. The good ideas that got thrown in are ruined by just how worn out this old ride is. It's not uninteresting because it's bad and I hate it, because I don't think it's bad. I think it's derivative as hell. I've been there, I've done that, and it was better the first time. But you can never do something for the first time twice. The law of diminishing returns is, after all, the law.